Mike Miller, and Maryland just retained its AAA bond rating. I talked about this, $200 million deficit that you're going to have to deal with, the governor's going to have to deal with, and then the slots referendum. But how does the AAA bond rating fit in to this whole mix here?
Well, fortunately, we stand on the shoulders of some very brave and smart people who we've served with and served before us, particularly the Louis Goldstein, the comptroller, who stressed fiscal responsibility. We've set up spending affordability limits, which we don't allow ourselves to go beyond. We look at the consumer price index. We're one of only 7 states that has this coveted AAA bond rating, and we work hard to continue it. If you lose it, the public pays more, and we need to hold on to it, to keep selling our bonds at the best possible rates.
So these votes in November, these upcoming, the next regular session in January, that's going to be important for the.
Well, we're going to find a way to hold on to it. For example, let's say we lose the slots referendum. I hope we don't. I'm pretty confident we're not going to, but that's going to be a $600 million hole that we're going to have to fill. In addition to the continuing inflationary times. This is the highest inflationary times in recent memory. The price of gas is up, price of milk's up, price of health care is up, bread. If we do it, we're going to have to just make cuts. We've gone the tax route. We're not going to go back and increase taxation. It's going to be cut, and that's the only fiscally responsible thing to do. You're in a household, you don't generate more income. You have to tighten your belt, and that's what the government's going to have to do as well.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're a voracious reader of history. You're a student of history, and you gave an interview a while back, and I'd like to just, there was one quote that kind of jumped out at me. The question was, is it important for politicians and public servants to have a sense of history? And you answered, it's imperative because history repeats itself over and over again. Every civilization has its ups and downs, and we as humans make the same mistakes over and over again. And we have, right now the Iraq war, because it's cost $600 billion. You have issues that the Congress isn't, and the president aren't able to deal with. Immigration, big issues, health care reform. Price of gasoline is now almost $4.50 a gallon. But does this era kind of remind you of any era of history?
I would say the Roosevelt administration, Theodore Roosevelt. He was dealt with the Irish immigrants, anti-immigration mood. He dealt, right now, for example, the division between the rich and the poor is greater than any time in U.S. history, and he dealt with that. He took on the corporations and the trusts. Also, in terms of the environment, he was one of our really first environmentalists, and he went and protected the redlands and the redwood trees and the open spaces. So you can go back in history over and over again and find analogies, but I would say that era is one I think most similar.
The country has a lot on its plate, but you're still optimistic?
Oh yes, I mean if you have the right leaders and someone who works hard at consensus building, you can move forward. These are difficult times, but I have hope for the next president of the United States and the Congress. We have to look at the war-making powers again. I mean, and this is, the War of 1812. Look at the turmoil that went through this. The Congress has to have a role in the war-making powers, and they abrogated the responsibility of not being totally analytical in terms of understanding and appreciating what this was all about before voting for this war in Iraq. And of course, they were given false information by the government, which was totally outrageous. They were led down this path, primrose path, by the President of the United States and people under his direct command, and they led them in the wrong direction.
And I know you were close to President Bill Clinton, and you knew other presidents of the United States, but are these figures kind of larger than life, the presidents of the United States, or are they just somebody who just somebody else from the United States?
I found Bill Clinton to be brilliant, absolutely brilliant, with great failings. But I admired him greatly in terms of, it's like God went down to Arkansas and found this person and gave him brilliance. But at the same time, said, look, for every good point I'm going to give you in terms of making you one of the most intelligent persons on the face of the earth, I'm going to create failings in you. And but his brilliance overshadows his failings, in my opinion. And he did a fine job as president. Unfortunately, his moral failings adversely affected his presidency.
One of your top lieutenants a few years ago is now the United States Congressman from the Maryland's 8th District. That's Chris Van Hollen, but he was in the state Senate, I think, for 8 years. Again, it seemed like one of your lieutenants. And did you see great things for Chris? And he's risen to be the chairman of the.
I did, and I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him. He comes from great genes. His mom and dad, knew them, admired them. His wife is. It's a partnership. I endorsed him very early when he ran for Congress, and because I saw in him hard work, I saw tenacity, I saw progressivism. I saw he had bold ideas, but he was a hard worker. I'd assign him gun control issues. Like, for example, here's your issue, and he would make it happen. Healthcare, and he would make it happen. And he would work tenaciously until his goals were achieved. And he's doing that in the Congress of the United States right now, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of his job now as the DCCC person is to elect Democrats this election cycle, which is very, very difficult because they had their gains 2 years ago. So for him to improve upon what Rahm Emanuel did 2 years ago is going to be exceedingly difficult, but he's confident that he can do so.
Do you still talk to Chris Van Hollen left the state Senate, and other people leave the state Senate, move on, run for other offices? Do you still keep in touch?
Very much so. I'm familiar with Chris's family, his history. His history goes back to Prince George's County. We still stay, and of course my Congressman, Steny Hoyer, we've been close friends for 40 years, 50 years. And, I call him on a regular basis and he calls me. In fact, I decided I wasn't going to run again. Some people say they're not going to run before they run and enhance they say, well, I want to serve 1 term or 2 terms. Well, I won in November a year and a half ago, and I said, look, hey, I'm tired. I've done this for 4 years. I'm not going to run again. And the first call I got was Steny, are you crazy? What are you doing? We need you. And I said, well, Steny, look, I've got 5 children, I got 12 grandchildren. He said, look, our challenges are ahead of us. And then the governor said the same thing, and others said the same thing. So I've kind of rethought it, but it was largely because of the first person I called was Steny Hoyer. I said, look, the state needs you, Southern Maryland needs you. I kind of rethought my position.
Well, you probably remember this, but he had quite a kind of a setback, and he rose to great heights. He's now the U.S. House Representative Majority Leader, but he ran for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Maryland. I guess it would be the early 70s. Blair Lee, the second or the third, was on the top of the ticket. They lost to Harry Hughes. Somehow he came back after that.
Well, he's had other set. He lost for county executive of Prince George's County. Many people don't know that, but. Like I say, I've been with him since the very beginning. He lost a race for county executive. He lost a race for lieutenant governor. But when Gladys Spellman passed, he saw an opportunity and ran for a congressional seat in an area he didn't even live in. He didn't even live in that congressional district. And he ran in that congressional district, worked hard. He's always has been an overachiever and won. And now he's risen to the ranks. And in my opinion, he would have been the speaker, except for the fact that Maryland only had 8 congressmen and California had 26. But he's formed a partnership with Nancy Pelosi, and the two of them are doing exceedingly well.
What is it about Maryland? It's kind of an interesting state, not that big, I think 5 million or 6 million people, but it produces Steny Hoyer, the Mike Millers, Martin O'Malley. Nancy Pelosi's from Baltimore. She was born in Baltimore, former Nancy D'Alessandro. Barbara Mikulski. What is it about this state that kind of produces these, top-level politicians?
Washington, D.C. was carved from my county in 1791. So we hear the free world, the capital of the free world, we're surrounded by it. The Washington Post is our hometown newspaper. This is you get at a very young age, the great leaders are our neighbors. Most of them live here in Montgomery County. In terms of commuting to Washington, D.C. And you see them in church, you see them in the shopping market, you see them all around, and then you read about them in the newspaper and the policies, and you get that from the time you're in kindergarten on up through college, and you generate an interest in it. Also, the history of the United States came from the East. It started in the East. I mean, that's where, obviously the founding fathers came from. These were the original colonies. And when you study about United States history in school, you study about the East. You study about Maryland, you study about Washington, D.C., you study about Virginia, Pennsylvania, and the colonies, and those people who came. The person who had my job, President of the Senate, was Charles Carroll Carrollton, the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. Another person who had my job, Daniel Carroll, wrote those lines: "Those powers not reserved to the federal states are reserved to the people, or to the states of the people." Another person who had my job was William Smallwood, the leader of the Maryland line at the Revolution. You study about those people, and you understand and you appreciate the jobs you have, and you want to do a good job.
When you sit in the Senate President's office in the Capitol in Annapolis, do you think about who sat in that office and who served as the Senate President?
Every day. It's mind-boggling every day, and you try to emulate them, and you try to do what's right, and it's a very awesome responsibility.
Down the road, when you do retire at some point, maybe after another term or two,
I don't know.
What do you want people to say about you?
Probably that I focused on education, that he was honest, that he worked hard, that he made people's lives better by focusing on education. That the children that. Some of my heroes and that were state senators were responsible for the first free textbooks in school. Some of my heroes were responsible for equal monies for school children in terms of African Americans and Caucasians. Some of my predecessors focused on civil rights. It's important to have a legacy, but I like mine to be education and also protecting the environment and encouraging better recreational activities for Marylanders. For example, I would like Marylanders to have access to the Chesapeake Bay and to the rivers. You go to Florida, they have these public beaches. Maryland has more miles of waterfront than any state in the Union. Believe it or not, it's small Maryland, and yet the public has limited access to these waterfront opportunities. There are a number of places in the United States rather than the state, where I've identified that the state can get involved and guarantee that Marylanders have access to our natural resources.
And I know that you, when you were a youngster, you worked at your family's general store, and from a humble beginnings. We only have a minute left, but how much of that that still stays with you?
Every day. Charles Dana, who wrote 2 years before the Mass, said that his Harvard was a whaling ship. Mine was a grocery store. The public was always right, carrying out groceries, making certain that the public was well served. The door didn't close at 8 o'clock if there was a customer waiting to be served. And, you did a little bit of everything, whether it was a produce or delivery or cashier. But the public was, there, and you just met and greeted them. And it wasn't a black or white issue. It was a green issue. You give credit and free delivery.
It's similar to Bill Clinton somewhat, because when he was growing up in Hoke, Arkansas, his grandfather ran a store like that.
Well, that was my grandfather's store. It was a general store, and you dealt with white and black people equally. It was, it was a green issue.
I don't know. Did you and Bill Clinton ever talk about that? Kind of have some similar type background?
No. But I've read his biography and every book about him, and I relate to him and in many, many ways.
Mike Miller, it's always an honor, privilege. Thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Good to see you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Remember, if it's Tuesday night at 9:30 or Thursday night at 9, it's Political Pulse on Channel 16 TV. I'm Charles Duffy. We'll see you next week.